We're continuing our 2024 classes. We're in the middle of the emotional section now, picking up where we left off last time. We have Larissa, Darinka, and Nat, the usual suspects. And we are going back to regular class material, having taken a week or so off to look at the presentation I put together for the upcoming talk at the Chautauqua, which I think is a pretty good talk. Any comments or questions from the crowd before we go?
Nope.
No, thank you. Good to go.
So, how are you? Responses depend on the national social context. When I was teaching at CU, I noticed when my students asked somebody, "How are you doing?" they'd say, "Fine, I'm really busy." And that struck me as quite peculiar, because why is being busy a good thing? And then they would say things even more perplexing, like they would say to me, "Professor, I hope you're really busy." And I thought, why is being busy a good thing? In Japan, they don't say this. They say, "O genki desu ka?" That's how's your life energy? And you typically answer genki desu, my life energy is good. In China, historically, how are you? The comment was, "Fine, I ate today," particularly in the Cultural Revolution. And today it's, "Fine, my stocks are up." And I happened to be traveling in Ireland around this time, and I noticed that they would say, "Fine, the weather's good," when the weather's not good. So why is being busy a good thing? Addiction is continued use of a mood-altering behavior with life-damaging consequences. I think that we feel anxiety if we're not busy. And if you want to feel your feelings, you've got to slow down. If you're running all the time, if you're really busy, you suppress your emotions, especially uncomfortable ones. So I wonder if we're not using busyness to mitigate the uncomfortable feeling of anxiety. And by the way, notice how busyness is like the word business. So here's some things you can do to slow down. Before you answer the phone, I guess this shows these slides are kind of dated. We don't make phone calls much anymore. But take 2 deep breaths and close your eyes for the conversation. Nobody will suspect you did this except through a deeper sense of feeling heard, which is a really deep human need, but do the experiment anyway. And I found it useful to have a moment of silence before the start of every meeting. It sort of cleared out the deck from all the other things of the day. Everybody has a little chance to focus. And Junko and I pause with itadakimasu, which is a Japanese expression when you eat. Just stop for a second. It's common in the US to stop, and many households say a little prayer. These little pauses. People tell me this worked really well for them. A powerful storyline shift. If you're waiting in a doctor's office, instead of getting frustrated, which is a nice word for angry, think of it as found time and enjoy it. I usually have an ebook with me. I sit and read a book, so I'm not bothered by this. This is a real picture in California of the Expressway 405. It can be like this at 3 a.m. And so if you're stuck in traffic, again, think of it as found time. If you're by yourself, you play the radio, whatever you want. Think of it as time, good time to be alone. And enjoy it. And people tell me this actually makes a big difference for them. So I believe that it's really important as a business executive to have 2 hours of free time a day. This is time to think, time to interact with people that you choose to interact with rather than responding to people. And in Western cultures, if someone wants to meet with you and you're in a meeting, they think that's important, so that they won't bother you. But if you're by yourself, the Western thought is that you're doing something useless, so it'll interrupt you. So I told my secretary, if I let it happen, my calendar would be busy every moment of every day. Schedule 2 hours a day of meetings with myself. And if someone asks what I'm doing, just say he's in a meeting, that's all. And this actually worked quite well. And I encourage people to negotiate quiet time for their team. What happens is, particularly I saw this at Jet Propulsion Lab, they're in meetings so much, they sit in meetings doing the work they've got to do by themselves. So of course, they're not focusing on the meeting and waste of time. And they went ahead and negotiated a contract, one of their big contractors negotiated every Wednesday morning, 3 hours when they would not do any social activities. They wouldn't answer the phone, they wouldn't do anything they didn't want to do. And I asked them, what do you call this time? And they said, doing real work. So if you set aside this time, then when you go to meetings, you can focus on the meetings. One of the things a guy taught me was, when you go into a meeting, the first thing you say is, why am I here and when can I leave? And it's actually polite to leave meetings that you don't need to be in. So I want to just have you, I think all this material, it's good to experiment with it yourself. So try this. Commit to doing nothing for 10 minutes. If you don't want to, if you're worried about wasting and doing it for 11 minutes, you can set a timer. And notice what happens. Don't be too surprised if you don't experience anxiety. I want to remind you that emotions are body sensations that our mind interprets and names as emotions, and anxiety will typically show up in your chest. So if you notice this and can identify it there, breathe into it, and that mitigates emotions. So the best way to do this is to belly breathe. So we're going to practice doing this. Get on your feet. Stand up. Put your hands on your stomach. And what you want to do is you want to practice breathing in, and your diaphragm is the muscle of breathing. It has nothing to do with your shoulders. And let your stomach expand out. Now, I know we live in a culture where having a big stomach is a bad thing. And it is possible to breathe in and contract your stomach, but that's not what you want to do. You want to breathe in and feel those deep breaths. Every time I demo this, I can feel myself relaxing as I do it. And by the way, I live up at 6,000 feet altitude. Breathe at this altitude, you need a really big stomach. That's how you belly breathe. So what this does is this activates the parasympathetic response. Remember, there are two basic states of stress, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the parasympathetic is one of deep relaxation. And I used to travel internationally a lot, and especially going to China. I'd arrive there and then have one day of rest. The next day I'd have to do a workshop. And typically the first night I'd wake up, it's 2 a.m. And so what I would do is I would belly breathe breaths and relax. And nothing happened. I didn't feel any differently. I opened my eyes, it's 4 a.m. Close my eyes, belly breathe. It feels like nothing's different. Open my eyes, it's 5 a.m. Just to be 6 a.m, get up for the day. It's good enough. So this is, by the way, every athlete knows this. Every opera singer knows this. Everybody that does anything where breath matters knows to do this. So to close off the emotions section, manage your emotions by slowing down, feeling them, and breathing into them. Don't use busyness to avoid them. And check for your storylines in play. That's what's powering your emotions. Express the emotions that situations require. This is interesting, my evolution been through emotions. When I first started this, I was kind of reluctant to deal with emotions because the storyline that people were running was, we don't have any emotions here. I've actually seen NASA managers get up and say, I'm Mr. Spock, I have no emotions, and you can feel the emotions brimming as they say it. So the first version of this was to learn to notice and name and experience emotions. But then the bigger piece is to express the emotions. I think start meetings with humor. Humor helps you, makes people want to respond to your requests. And I don't think anything's as powerful to deal with big difficulties than making fun of them. Anger at situations, and if you include caring, it'll motivate. Remain centered. Belly breathe into this anger and to drain it and calm it down. Don't let it take control of you. Sad is useful to move through losses. As I showed you, melancholy is surprisingly effective to let you create. I think it's a place of slowing down, lets the brain freewheel and run. Some people have the same experience in showers or bicycling. Scared is good to bring attention to impending calamities. If it includes caring, it will definitely powerfully motivate. And for love group, make appreciation a habit. Speak of loving your work. Embrace empathy. Emotions are like children. You don't want them driving the car, but you don't want to stuff them in the trunk either. So comments or thoughts on emotions? What was your takeaway here? Did you get something out of this?
That's such a great statement. Thank you, Charlie. Comparing emotions to children. Easy to remember and very powerful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's almost it's so right on the point that we want to see. It's almost like having an appointment with your counselor. So so I hope people who are watching this and recording really watch it, have a practice of watching this at least weekly, because it just really helps a lot. Thank you, Charlie.
Nat, any comments?
The only thing that was just hitting for me, and like we have a lot of different words for different emotions, and I think, you know, in what popped in my head was anxiety. Is that more in the scared
Yeah.
group? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's just kind of me continuing to,
it's definitely scared group.
yeah, so it's just me kind of continuing to point the words that we use for the same emotions and make sure they're pointing to the right group, so that I'm understanding how to apply.
I've kept the pattern: glad, mad, sad, scared, and love.
Yep. No, I like that.
Throughout, you know.
Yep.
By the way, there is another emotion, surprise, but it's not it's a bit player in my opinion. So I don't talk about it much. I don't think it's it's not in the same league as the big five. So again, trying to simplify it. The
Yep.
big five are what really matter.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Storylines. So the last section was making emotions work for you. Now let's make thoughts work for you too. This is the field of cognitive, I always struggle with the pronouncing cognitive psychology simplified. And I really got onto this when I heard a talk by a guy named Albert Ellis, rational emotive behavioral therapy. He's kind of a nut, but his message was interesting. It got me onto this whole field. So this is cognitive psychology greatly simplified. Basically, we're going to color storylines like traffic lights. Green storylines support behaviors that take you to outcomes. Red storylines take you to behaviors that distract you. And most typically, they're drama states of victim and blamer. So this is, you want to be noticed. And so here's what the fun part of this: with emotions, you don't really get to choose them. They sort of come and you got to deal with them by breathing is the best simple thing I know. These are choices. What you think to yourself, what you say are choices. And of course, they play right directly into emotions. The power of thoughts. In the beginning, there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. How does it get any bigger than that? From the Roman Empire, our life is what our thoughts make it. The world is what we think it is. If we change our thoughts, we change the world. That's a novelist, Tomlinson. And this is from the Toltec. This is a civilization that followed the collapse of Teotihuacan in central Mexico and lasted for 1,000 years. This is a picture I took myself in the capital city, Tula. It's a book called the Four Agreements. I was trying to think of the name. The word is the most beautiful tool you have as a human. It's a tool of magic. So once again, we're looking at ideas that have been around for a very long time. So we're going to look at a definition of storylines. That's not the truth. It can save or ruin industries. There was an industry that didn't change their storyline until a single foreign country took 70% market share, and I'm sure you all know what it is. Nations run storylines. One of the things I like to do is observe how people drive. It tells you volumes about what's going on in a country. In China, the drive are perhaps the most expert in the world, and they ignore rules as they please, drive as they want. Practicality's the deal. I've been in a car going to a restaurant, and there was a 4-lane road with 4 lanes on each side. When he saw the restaurant was closer, we drove the wrong direction for 2 blocks on the against the traffic on a one-way street. And people blew the horn and moved out of the way. He just smiled and went on. In Germany or Japan, they're going to follow the rules. Italy is actually the closest thing to China in terms of breaking rules. They ignore if the highway has 4 lanes in Italy and 5 lanes will fit, and traffic gets slow, it'll be 5 lanes. And this storyline's about motivation. This is what political theater is all about. If you listen to the right wing or left wing radio, all you'll hear is storylines about the opposition. And it turns out they're wrong 95% of the time. And we're going to look at the animal kingdom, for example, of how storylines that can limit you that don't have to. So does this look like fun, folks? Okay.
Yep.
And I remind people again. So story is the telling of a happening, true or fictitious, with the intent of reforming or persuading. Truth is that which is unarguable. Storylines are self-taught. These are things generated in our mind that influence us when we say them to ourselves and influence others when we say it to others. They're not the truth because they're arguable. So the shortest unarguable truth is the truth of your experience. So I've learned when I'm arguing with Junko, for example, I will say, I heard versus you said. I heard is unarguable. You said it sustains an argument. A really simple example of this is, I feel hot versus this room is hot. If I say this room is hot in a workshop, half the people say, no, it's not. And I'm hot because I'm working. I'm up there talking. I've got lights on me. So I feel hot. Here's what's interesting about this. We talked about how to make appreciation authentic. If you get in the mindset of gratitude, then the appreciation that you express is the truth of your experience and hence authentic. So just an example of the power of the truth of your experience. And there's an exception to this, spouses. I'm hungry. No, you're not. Are you guilty of homophily, any of you? Usually the workshop goes dead quiet when I say this. And the reason is they think it has something to do with homosexuality, but it doesn't. Homophily is our preference to relate with people who share our storylines. This is back to the inquiry you raised earlier, Larissa, about the 2 cultures being in conflict. If you run a storyline that rules and discipline are the way to success, and someone else runs a storyline that says, no, creativity, out of the box thinking, that's the key to success. You're not gonna be comfortable with each other, so we definitely like to be as people. That's the reason I think people go to church. If you go to church and all these people are the same storyline about God, it has to be true. And the same thing with political parties. We like to listen to political news that shares our storylines. Everybody clear? Good. When we hear storylines we agree with, a small voice says that's the truth. And we feel fondness, love group emotions for the person who's saying it. Here's storylines we disagree with. A small voice says that's just your storyline. So in workshops, from this point on, what I do is I play with people. And if they say something that I agree with, I say that's the truth. Say something I disagree with, I'll say that's just your storyline. And they know I'm just jostling with them. So Darinka, you want to get us on our feet? Okay, let's go. You know the drill.
I've got to say, I've gotten really good at those. Tanya's been helping me focus on my form. You gotta get into your glutes. So
Say some our best to Tanya.
I will.
Hope she's doing good.
She is. She's very busy, but
Yeah.
doing well.
Yeah, we miss her.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of which, Nat, you also said she's doing well, she's busy. So
Right?
that's
Yep.
how we say it here in US, right?
Yep. Apparently, I nailed it.
Okay. So red or green storylines and S. You know what S is? Everybody gets real quiet when I do this too. S
All
is,
right.
S is situation, okay?
Okay.
So green storylines get you the outcomes you want. And red storylines get you stuck in S.
Yeah.
What is S?
A
Situation.
situation. Yes.
You were thinking something more like this for S? So improving quality means higher cost. A US industry ran this storyline, as I mentioned before. We're forever behaviorists. What behavior does this storyline support? You manufacture low quality products. The US industry did not question this storyline until another country took 66% market share. And you know what this industry was.
Yeah. That's Toyota, right?
Yeah, a consultant named W. Edwards Deming, who was pretty much ignored in the US, as am I, went to a small town in Japan no one had ever heard of, a city of Toyota, and he taught them this storyline. Improving quality is the best way to lower cost. What behaviors that support? You
Green.
manufacture high quality products. I just want you to think about this for a second. This is how powerful this little thought is. And how what you think every day it matters. So storylines in religion are very powerful. This is from Mark Twain. Man is a religious animal. He's the only religious animal. He's the only animal that has the true religion, several of them, in fact. He's the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He's made a graveyard of the globe and trying his honest best to smooth his brother's path to happiness in heaven. So running religious storylines can make good people better or may make bad people worse. Could think terrorists. So a burglar breaks into a house and hears Jesus is watching you. Sees a parrot in the corner, walks up and asks, "Are you talking to me?" The parrot said, "Yes, my name is Ronald." The burglar laughs and says, "What kind of idiot gives a parrot a stupid name like that?" The parrot laughs and says, "The same idiot who names his pit bull Jesus."
Yeah, funny every time. Oh, Charlie, you always find some nice stories and yeah, share a little laugh.
You know the difference between heaven and hell? I can help you. Heaven is a Japanese wife, British police, Chinese cook, American house, and a German car. Hell is a Japanese house, a British cook, a Chinese salary, Indian trains, and German police. By the way, the Chinese salary thing gets a big laugh in China. So national storylines and behaviors. Today, there's a storyline in the US. Don't you see this? We can each choose our own reality. And the behavior is to ignore peer-reviewed science. You know, I'm talking about climate change here.
Yep.
In China, the storyline I frequently hear is too many people. And the behavior is practicality overrides rules. That's shot outside my hotel window in Beijing. That's not an accident. That's normal traffic, okay? In Japan, the island cannot feed our people. They got a population of about 125 million and very little arable land, so they can only feed about 40 million. So behavior is we gotta export enough goods to buy that food, and it gets to be karoshi, death by overwork, or the colonialism of the last century.
Say that last part again.
Yeah, the colonialism,
That's what drove the behavior.
yeah.
Gotcha.
The need for resources. It's not just food, it was food, oil. But actually, it's a little more interesting. Japan, as you take a minute to talk about this, Japan had 250 years of total isolation under what the Tokugawa shogunate. And in, I think, 1853, something like that, they had contact with foreign ships occasionally, but Perry sails into Yokohama Harbor and blasts a couple of cannon blasts. So this got their attention. And they quickly modernized. And in 1905, they had a war with Russia and they defeated the Russian Navy. And to some Japanese, they say that's the worst thing that could have ever happened to them, because that led them to believe they were a superior race and everything. And it was their proper role to rule this part of Asia. So that began a very successful military conquest, most notably and disastrously into Manchuria, China, and all these red islands. They took all that land. Look at the size of the island compared to all that. And basically, when they fought on the side of the Allies in World War I, and they got some island land in compensation, and they said, if look what they did. If we can do the same thing that England, Portugal, Spain, and France did, we can take colonies. They did it. And since they already did it, they won't bother us for doing it. And this was unchallenged until Roosevelt came along and said, we got to put an end to this and let's set up a blockade that blockaded everything, but particularly oil. And of course, he knew very well that when you blockade a country, an island, they're gonna either completely vanish or they're gonna fight. So he provoked Pearl Harbor that led to the rest of the story you're familiar with. But basically, it's from the fact that there's, I think only 11% of the land is arable in the country of Japan. So food is fundamental. Oil is right up there with it.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, you're welcome. France, we have the best food and language, therefore we're entitled to vacations and huge pensions. Germany, discipline and effort are the only way to success, obey the rules and work hard. Is it obvious why those two countries have been at war most of the time? And North Korea, dear leader, fear of attack, isolation, underdevelopment. Storylines. So client called me and it was my TRW, my favorite client, and said the customer is threatening to cancel our contract. So can you come out? So it was, the story was that they had won a contract for an earth science mission, look like that. And lost it to Lockheed Martin. And Lockheed Martin was going to sell people on the idea you can do this. After they lost the competition, you had the wrong procurement. Instead, you should be able to do this better with a bunch of small satellites. So I got on a plane, flew out to Los Angeles. And I said, tell me why he wants to do this. And Bruce, my primary contact, said, our competitor got to them again. Every time we win, they go behind the scenes and start bad mouthing us and come up with some new idea. It's all about them. Sam said he's never liked our company. He's just never liked TRW. He's got a thing for us. And Mary said he's getting orders from above. Dan Golden's mad he didn't get promoted here. So he's making him do it. So I know these people pretty well. And I said, Bruce, I hear that storyline from you all the time. You always see Lockheed Martin behind every bush. And Sam, you frequently complain that people don't like the company. And Mary, you often complain about upper management. So this is projection. This is mirror image thinking. The way this works is that who we under stress, who we are, is so powerfully affects our perception. We project it on the scene, and that's what we see. We see things not as they are, but as we are. This is one more piece of how human perception is malleable.
I would love a whole class on that. It's so powerful.
You know, I want you to think about this. You see it in just to talk a minute about this. You see it in political campaigns. They project who they are on the competitor. You see this. The thing that worries me about this is that we have a crisis of sorts coming up. It's every time in history, have not been many times, that a power that's been overwhelmingly powerful gets overtaken by somebody else. That war results. The classic case is England, who led the world in the 1800s. And Germany wasn't even a country till 1870. There was a bunch of independent states. They became a country to challenge England, and they did. And by the early 1900s, they were scientific leaders. So that led to people think World War II. Now we're in that same position with China, and it's even more dramatic. So what I worry about is to the extent the US projects our militarism on China, we're going to imagine they're going to attack us and go first. That's how dangerous projection is. And when I hear the political commentary about China, that's usually what I hear. I usually name it as projection. So this is interesting human phenomenon. I think, Larissa, like most things, when stress is low, you're much more rational. When stress becomes high, that's when these other forces take over. And lacking anything else, you're going to project. So projection, I think, is very dangerous. I think the US has been at war every year but 5 since 1776. And we are a warlike country. And so trying to see through the reality of this, is not easy. So given what I just told you, you're their consultant, what would you do now? What would you tell them? I want you to see that what action you took would depend quite heavily on which storyline you bought into. If you bought into the storyline Lockheed Martin's the problem, you'd put some kind of attack on Lockheed Martin. If you bought into the storyline that was directions from upper management, you'd find some way to counter that. So you've got 3 storylines, each of which you can now see is more about the person than about the reality. What would you tell them?
To me, it feels like the most important thing is to figure out what the true
Yep.
what the true situation is.
How would
So that
you
you
find
can-
that out? How would you find out what this individual's motivations were?
Talk to them.
Ask him. Okay? It's exactly what I said. Did anybody ask him why he wants to cancel this program? And he said, yeah, because this is all in one giant mission. And I'm afraid that with the politics in Washington, Earth Science is going to get a budget cut. And I was there during, he was there during the Challenger, when we had these budget slips and budgets slips due to launch schedules. And it just wasted a ton of money. So he wants the flexibility to accommodate budget cuts. What he's been told is, if you have a whole bunch of small satellites, you're much more able to accommodate this because you simply don't start the next satellite. So I said, that makes sense to me. What's interesting is, this wasn't what Sam reported. The projection was so powerful that this isn't what he told me. He said that he doesn't like the company. His projection overrode the reality that he knew to be true. It was right there. So they had a good story. I helped them put it together. That I never went to see customers with I was a consultant. I didn't want to represent them. That wasn't my job. Had a good story. They said he was so happy that he wants to do more business with them. So here's a consultant makes a living with this. Storylines by other people's motivations are wrong 95% of the time. So what do you do with this information? Rinka, your typing's quite loud. Okay.
Apologies. I'm taking notes. Sorry about that.
Yeah. How do you use this insight? What do you do now that you know this?
Well,
When you're running, go
for
ahead.
me, for me, it's really, this is really an important element. So to me, it would be remembering to ask people what their motivations are
Right.
before I get too deep on a path of acting based on my assumptions.
Yep. And what about when you hear someone running a storyline about someone's motivation? What would you say?
Well,
Stop
ask
that
them.
storyline.
Yeah,
Something's
ask them.
totally wrong.
Yeah, how do you know that? Is it your assumption or do you really know it?
So here's the thing. It's really easy to catch other people doing this. It's much harder to catch yourself. So the bachelor's degree is other people. Do you hear what you're doing? You're running a storyline about motivations. What's the likelihood that it's wrong? And the PhD is, uh-oh, I'm doing it. I better stop. So that's the trick here. It's this whole storyline piece is pretty interesting.
As Nat said, I would love to have a special class just on that. Because honestly, this concerns every one of us and many others who listen this and recording. So yes, if ever we can really drill a little bit more to the details of that, that would be great.
Well, I think I don't have a lot more to offer to this idea of projection. But I think this is a really useful little tool for this. And this is the best thing that I know to deal with this phenomenon. You know, when you're projecting, you don't know you're doing it.
Right.
It's unconscious. So just be aware. And I think the place that it really matters is when you're talking about this subfield of motivations. When you feel yourself making a story about what's motivating someone, stop and ask yourself, what's the hard evidence? And I think it's that simple, really. And if you listen to the political diatribe, it's all, I'd say almost every word of it is about what's motivating Biden to do something, or what's motivating Trump to do something, what's motivating Harris to do something. It's all about their motivation. You know, Harris wants to open the gates to immigrants or whatever. Just listen to it. It's almost all storylines about motivations. And for some reason, we buy into this. We like storylines about motivations because we want to believe it. And yet they're almost always just completely fabricated. And the only way to find out is with evidence of what they actually said. Some people will push back and say, well, they might lie to you. Yeah, they might. I don't think it's likely, but you also need to get some sort of a sense of detector when you're being lied to. And I think that that's not very frequent. If you ask someone flat out, what do they think about almost anything, they're probably going to tell you.
So is one way to combat that to reflect back to the person? What I hear you saying is X.
That's you can certainly do that, or just flat ask them, why are you motivated to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Or what are you motivated to do and why? I think you're talking about a stylistic thing that works fine.
Okay.
But I just
Sure.
think the main, however you do it, just go ask them. And this case is real. This really happened. This is not made up. And exactly as it played out. And this was a senior NASA manager or contractors asking them. And he's, you know, he's in a position of power, so there's no reason he's got to disguise anything. Just tells you. So the main trick here is when you're running. So listen to the politicians talk about what China's up to. Their storylines about motivations.
Right.
But where's your evidence? What makes you think this? And they usually won't have any.
Charlie, this is not only a skill, this is in somewhat probably a talent to be able I don't know about other listeners and other Charlie students, but to me it's not that easy, quite frankly, to find to find a good story. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's very hidden.
Yeah,
So
all you want to do, I think, is have a tripwire to pay attention to storylines you're running. And you, in general, you want to look at storylines, say, does this take the situation forward or not? That's the red-green part.
yeah.
And then this subtle part that says, if it's about other people's motivations, just know that it's probably made up. And then go find out, you know, what's the truth. It's to me, it's like setting a tripwire, like you'd have you know, a military metaphor would be you got an encampment and you want to be safe to sleep at night, so you might set up tripwires around the place that someone trips that wire, it rings an alarm. This is about a tripwire, and all you got to do is ask, is the storyline have to do with some other people's motivations? When you hear that trip line, the bell should go off and say, wait a minute. Bingo, what's going on here? What am I doing? I know the evidence is almost certainly wrong. And the reason it's wrong is it's more about me than about them.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is to try and stay out of stress as you can, and breathing and, you know, all the things we talked about, having time for yourself, these are all part of that. It's
Charlie, in the next few minutes that we have left, if you don't mind me asking, and I hope this is going to be useful for Darinka and for all of you who listen to this recording, can you just elaborate very quickly what the Sam said, really what he wanted to flexibility to accommodate budget cuts. Can you translate this in a plain English, what it is that he exactly wanted?
So the proposal one was a big giant single satellite. I showed you
Yeah,
a graph of it, okay?
yeah,
The competitor came in and said, we can do the same job with say 5 small satellites,
okay,
and you can fly them sequentially. Whether that technically is right, I don't know the details, but that's what the story was. And we lost the competition, and we're gonna say you're doing it the wrong way from the get-go. This is the wrong way to do it. But this is one big system, and the argument is, once you start, and they're right about this in general. Once you start building something like that, and you have to slip the schedule because you don't have enough money, the budget goes through the roof. There's a whole lot of what's called sustaining engineering. The engineers you got to have around, for example, for the test phase of the project.
yeah,
And if you don't have enough money and you gotta slow everything down, you got a lot of overhead costs because you need to keep certain talent. So it's very inefficient. There's the best way to do a big project is you lay out a schedule, and the funding curve invariably has a big peak and a drop off.
yeah,
Big peak is at the time when you're finishing up all the hardware, you're delivering it. Once it's all in hand, you got a big test program. And as you start to complete the test program, you get rid of people and gradually you get to launch, and there's no cost.
yeah,
So it's very difficult if you get a project, let's say up in peak funding, and now you get a budget cut, so you gotta slow that de-optimize this construction. And it's kind of like, say, if this house got halfway done and I said, I'm out of money, I need to wait a year. I've got the mortgage, all the carrying costs, all that stuff, another year. The run out cost is gonna go up significantly if I can't complete it on time. As I told the builder many times, time is money. Getting this done the fastest possible way is the cheapest possible way. So the same thing in spades with a space project. So what they're saying is, rather than build one house, you're gonna build 5 little houses. And you can start the first one, and if money looks tight, you delay starting the second one. You complete the first one, so that's the basic argument. But doing it with 5 or so small units is much more flexible than one big, they're right about that. And TRW came in and showed them how they would deal with this with their own strategies to mitigate this. And the story was really good. So they convinced the customer that if the money started to get tight in the middle, they had ways to curtail the run out increase.
okay, okay, thank you, Charlie.
Everybody clear on this? What happened here?
Yep.
So when you lose the competition, you look for some other way to get your foot in the door. It's just, I don't blame Lockheed Martin for trying. That's kind of what they're supposed to do. But so yeah, I think in projects in general, there's an optimal way to do it, and it requires funding the peaks. Same thing with the house. I never graphed the funding, but when we got into that, there was a time there when there were 15 pickup trucks in the driveway. You're spending money when you got that. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Thank you, Dr.
See you
Pellerin.
next week.
You have a great day.
Be
Bye-bye.
well, be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.